Tonight, shockwaves across America and around the world as Donald Trump defies the polls and the pundits again. A dramatic triumph as the brash billionaire turned reality star is elected the 45th president of the United States.
I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
For Hillary Clinton, one of the most stunning defeats in American political history.
Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country.
The candidate and her campaign so confident victory was in their grasp. What happened? We have exclusive details inside Trump's planning, plus the immediate impact of his policies at home and abroad. Tonight, Americans divided from euphoria to outright fear. How does this country come together? Nightly News begins right now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. We've learned that even as the first polls were closing last night, not even the Trump camp saw what was coming. The stunning victory that slowly unfolded before the eyes of the world, starting with Florida and over the next several hours, overwhelming Hillary Clinton's blue wall. The latest vote totals show Trump winning with 279 electoral votes to Hillary Clinton's 228, though Clinton holds a narrow lead in the popular vote. Trump delivered his acceptance speech in the wee hours of this morning, followed late this morning by Hillary Clinton, who publicly conceded the race and acknowledged the pain as she wished Trump well. Tonight, inside victory and loss, and what comes now 71 days before Donald Trump is sworn in as this country's 45th president. Our expanded coverage begins with NBC's Katie Tur.
Introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
At 2:50 this morning, Donald Trump did what so many said could never happen.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign.
His protest candidacy is now a protest presidency. The billionaire giving voice to those who felt voiceless, suppressed frustration with globalization, immigration, and the other, unleashing itself in a roar that turned this country's electoral map from blue to red.
We have the greatest movement ever put together in this country.
Propelled by turnout in white rural America, breaking Clinton's blue wall in the upper Midwest. Trump proving enthusiasm was more important than ground game, political infrastructure, and money.
USA!
Winning because of, not despite, his often crass honesty. Still, the victory came as a surprise even to the campaign. Going into Election Day, NBC News has learned from campaign sources, Team Trump's internal data had him losing. But that changed. At 10:59, cheers from the soon-to-be victory party. Fox News called Florida, Trump's campaign seeing the momentum shift right alongside the nation. By 1:36 a.m., when the Associated Press called Pennsylvania, they knew they had it.
85,000 people there at a county fair. And, you know, the big question for the media sometimes, but will they vote? They voted.
Today, the now president-elect was holed up at Trump Tower, planning. Campaign sources say Trump was too superstitious to talk transition before he won, leaving his aides to muse about cabinet positions. Rudy Giuliani as Attorney General, Newt Gingrich, Secretary of State, Reince Priebus, Chief of Staff. A Trump campaign source cautions roles could change once Trump has his say.
Sexually assaulting women!
Going forward, the hard work of coming together. The country is sharply divided. Many wondering if the Trump they saw on stage last night.
Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division.
The presidential Trump he promised Lester Holt is the President Trump America will get for the next 4 years.
I want to be different. When you're president, you act in a different way. There's no question about that. And I would do that.
Tomorrow, Donald Trump goes to the White House to meet with the president. The two men have a lot to overcome. Perhaps a mirror, Lester, for what is to come for this country.
Katie, thanks very much. And for Hillary Clinton and her campaign, it was an outcome so unexpected, so shocking, she didn't come out overnight, instead calling Donald Trump to concede, then waiting until late this morning before addressing her supporters and the nation. We get more on that from NBC's Andrea Mitchell.
After weeks of speculation over whether Donald Trump would concede to Hillary Clinton, it was Clinton this morning delivering the speech she never thought she'd have to give.
Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead.
Surrounded by staff and supporters, some in tears, including Huma Abedin, Clinton fighting to keep her own emotions in check.
I'm sorry that we did not win this election for the values we share and the vision we hold for our country.
This was clearly the most difficult moment of Hillary Clinton's political life. Not only conceding, but conceding to Donald Trump. Difficult for President Obama, too, for whom defeating Trump was so personal, his staff watching in shock.
The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world.
Tonight, the candidate and her campaign reeling. Up until the last moment, they thought they'd win. 6 p.m. election night, poised for a victory celebration, aides describing the mood as confident. By midnight, the campaign no longer returning calls. Supporters watching it all slip away in disbelief. At 2 a.m., this awkward moment. Campaign chairman John Podesta telling supporters not to give up hope.
We can wait a little longer, can't we? They're still counting votes, and every vote should count.
While only minutes later, Clinton called Trump to concede. Tonight, the question for the president and Democrats. With the Clinton machine's advantages of money, ground game, and star power, how did they lose an election they thought was a sure thing? Armchair quarterbacks blaming Clinton's use of that personal server, those embarrassing hacked emails, and the FBI director's October surprise. Today, Clinton's message to young people.
You will have successes and setbacks too. This loss hurts, but please never stop believing that fighting for what's right is worth it. I know we have still not shattered that highest and hardest glass ceiling, but someday someone will, and hopefully sooner than we might think right now.
Comforting staff and friends, even as Bill Clinton put on a brave face before heading home, marking what could be the end of the Clintons in politics.
And now Clinton shares a sad legacy with Al Gore, who is just campaigning with Hillary Clinton in Florida, the two Democratic candidates who won the popular vote, but not the presidency. Lester?
Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, thanks very much. We want to take a closer look now at one of the major deciding factors in Trump's victory, the white vote in rural America, a slice of the country whose strength many underestimated as they made a mockery of the polls, fueling this incredible upset. With more on that, we turn to NBC's Kevin Tibbles in Michigan.
In the American heartland, farmers like Aaron Kate are back at work, just one day after they say their voice and their vote was finally heard.
What's the message people like you sent?
I sense we've been forgotten in the last 8 years.
So important was Middle America to Trump, his final campaign event was a raucous gathering of 4,000 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Last night, local Republicans in this county of city and country celebrated.
I think we're going to look back in the records, look back in history and say history was made tonight.
It was the rural vote in the small towns of states like Michigan and Pennsylvania that helped push Trump over the top, with issues like jobs, health care, and big government.
More white voters in rural Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin went for Trump than they did for Mitt Romney 4 years ago. This coupled with the fact that Hillary supporters in certain demographics did not turn out in the same way they did for President Obama.
You know, I'd like to see us get back into business like we're supposed to be.
Smaller government, less regulations. That means more jobs and more money for the American people to spend.
Aaron Cates sees himself as helping to feed the country. He says he doesn't need any more baggage from Washington.
That's one thing I do hope, is we can get the government out of our lives and let us do what we do best.
And you think Trump will do that?
I think he's a good start.
Voters in rural America say they're ready to roll up their sleeves. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Saranac, Michigan.
As you might expect, the impact of the American election is reverberating around the world tonight. There are concerns among some foreign leaders about how Donald Trump might view America's traditional role in world affairs. But there are also plenty of congratulations being extended to the president-elect, including those of Vladimir Putin. We get details from our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel.
Donald Trump is the president-elect of the United States.
There were gasps around the world, headlines, Trumpocalypse, and disunited states. There are echoes of the Brexit vote, too, against the European Union establishment. But deeper concerns tonight that the world's shining light of democracy has gone dark.
You cannot look at President Trump and call the American president the leader of the free world, because America has increasingly abdicated its legitimacy to that title.
Those welcoming the most were right-wing parties who rushed to embrace Trump as their new hero. He's like me, joked the Filipino president, accused of turning his police into anti-narco death squads. Egypt's General Sisi, who came to power in a coup, bragged that he was the first foreign leader to congratulate Trump. And Hungary's Viktor Orban, who did wall off his country to keep out refugees, called Trump great news. And of course, Russia's Vladimir Putin.
I would have a very, very good relationship with Putin, and I think I would have a very, very good relationship with Russia.
Putin said today he's ready to open a new chapter with the U.S.
They see in Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump, somebody that they can do business with. There will be a honeymoon period for sure.
On foreign affairs, Trump is considered unpredictable, stoking fears that, at least initially, his presidency could usher in global instability. Lester?
Richard Engel tonight. Richard, thanks. Let's bring in our political director, the moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Chuck, we keep talking about this political earthquake. People saying they want change in Washington. Some have put it, we want to take our country back. Drill down for me.
Look, what this really is this economic insecurity that's happened out there. These are the folks that feel a bit left behind. They feel as if government is looking out for the families of undocumented immigrants, but they're not looking out for them who feel as if their jobs have disappeared. So it's this feeling of they don't feel they've been prioritized by the political and establishment in Washington. The question is going to be, can Trump deliver for them? You know, they left the Democratic Party in part because they felt like the Democratic Party didn't deliver. Trump's made a lot of promises. Can he deliver? The onus and the burden is on them. But that's what this is about ultimately. They feel as if they've been glossed over. I mean, look at the way we sometimes describe it ourselves. Flyover country. As if they're just sort of in the way, on our way to the West Coast type of thing. I think that whole feeling that they were just disrespected and not prioritized.
All right, and you talk about fulfilling the promise. This is where we're going to go to next. Still ahead, Trump's agenda, his first orders of business when he enters the White House, the potential impact and everything from the Supreme Court to Obamacare to his long-promised border wall. Also, after such a bitterly divided election, can America come together and stand united? We're back now with a look at President-elect Trump's agenda. After raising expectations of dramatic change in Washington, millions of supporters are expecting action and quickly. NBC's Hallie Jackson has a look at the potential sweeping changes ahead.
It's going to be a beautiful thing.
So Donald Trump won. Now what? Propelled by the power of a Republican-controlled Congress, his victory all but assures a more conservative Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court, it's what it's all about.
And his presidency guarantees the biggest battle yet over Obamacare.
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing Obamacare. It's a disaster.
Those campaign promises, realistic. Others, not so much.
We will build a great wall along the southern border.
His Mexican-funded border wall, unlikely. His temporary proposed Muslim ban, unpopular. Trump already signaling he won't take such a hardline stance on it. But some of his promises show a serious split with his own party on policy, disagreements on trade, and on Russia. The parliament in Moscow today celebrating Trump's election. Vladimir Putin sending a congratulatory telegram. Despite the divide, evidence already today of Republicans coming together.
He just earned a mandate, and we now just have that unified Republican government.
Support? Sure, but not a slam dunk. At least 8 Republican senators said they voted against Trump. On one hand, his promise to end corruption in Congress. On the other, an agenda that needs help from the very system he says he hates.
To get anything done, he needs to bring, to have them support him.
He does. He's going to need the Congress and the Republicans who he blasted again and again. They are now going to be his most important allies.
There is plenty that Donald Trump can do all on his own. He's already promised to roll back President Obama's executive actions on immigration and climate change. No need for congressional approval there, Lester.
All right. Hallie, thank you. When we come back here tonight, they're going from the penthouse to the White House, getting to know America's new first family. In just a couple of months, the White House will be home to a first family perhaps unlike any that has ever lived there. NBC's Cynthia McFadden has a look at the soon-to-be occupants of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the Trumps.
Donald Trump marches to the beat of his own drum, surrounded by a small band of intimates, many of whom he's related to. He thanked them last night.
I love you and I thank you. This was tough. This was tough.
And while they're not a traditional family, Melania's his third wife and the kids have 3 different mothers, a first in presidential history, there is clearly a deep bond between them.
You can't fake good kids. How about his amazing children? Aren't they something?
The glamorous Mrs. Trump speaks 5 languages, grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and will be only the second First Lady to be born abroad since Louisa Adams. She is not the first model to fill the role of First Lady. Both Pat Nixon and Betty Ford were models too, though more demure. What does history tell us about the role that Melania Trump might play?
History usually says that a First Lady comes into this job, and by the time she leaves, she's a very different person doing things that she never imagined.
And Mr. Trump has said many times he will turn over his business to his 3 oldest children while he's in the White House.
I have Ivanka and Eric and Don sitting there. Run the company, kids. Have a good time.
But he's also implied he might call on them for his administration.
Everybody would say, put Ivanka in, put Ivanka in.
But family appointments are tricky. A 1967 law prohibiting nepotism was passed after Robert Kennedy served as the Attorney General for his brother. The White House will again have a child in residence, 10-year-old Barron, who is the same age as Malia Obama was when she moved in. So goodbye 3-story penthouse in Trump Tower and hello White House. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, New York.
When we come back, America has come together after turbulent elections in the past. Can it do it again? In their speeches after the votes were counted, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton said it's time to unite the country. But that may be easier said than done after this long campaign left so many feeling angry and divided. Our Harry Smith takes a look at how America can begin to heal after the most contentious election of our time.
So much for polls and pundits. Funny things happen sometimes in big games and elections and real life. There is a momentum shift. So today, half the electorate is elated and the other half is on edge. We've endured 18 months of partisan rancor, but today President Obama said it's time to look at the big picture.
We're actually all on one team. We're not Democrats first, we're not Republicans first. We are Americans first.
Back in 2000, after more than a month of hanging chads and legal wrangling, Al Gore conceded the election to George Bush.
This is America, and we put country before party. We will stand together behind our new president.
What's best for the country can be a bitter pill. Yesterday, people waited in line for hours to vote. There was a buzz in polling places. That's how it's supposed to be. And while Donald Trump scorched the earth with his rhetoric on his way to victory, there was none of that early this morning.
It is time for us to come together as one united people.
In fact, there was a very different tone.
Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country.
This was a different Trump, humbled perhaps, awed maybe by the magnitude of what lies ahead. This peaceful transition of power goes back to our earliest history. We change governments with ballots, not bullets. We, the people, decide. And when the counting is done, we move forward. Harry Smith, NBC News, New York.
That will do it for us on this Wednesday night. Nightly News continues now with another half hour of coverage on most of our stations. For others, it will be streamed live on our website. We are back now with more of our continuing coverage of Donald Trump's stunning upset victory to make him the 45th president of the United States. One of the most improbable and incredible election dramas in American history. In the hours since Trump claimed victory, we've learned the outcome came as a shock even to the Trump campaign themselves. His rival, Hillary Clinton, publicly conceding the race today, admitting to a painful loss in the electoral vote, even as she holds a narrow lead in the popular vote. We've got much more on President-elect Trump and how his victory is impacting the country, starting with NBC's Peter Alexander.
Tonight, a stunning new reality. President-elect Donald Trump.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated.
The great disruptor pulling off an improbable triumph that even his closest aides say they didn't see coming.
I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. It's time.
For hours, Americans watched in suspense and disbelief as Trump's red state victories grew. Inside Hillary Clinton's headquarters, heartbreak. But at the War Room on Trump Tower's 14th floor, euphoria. Just shy of 2:30 a.m., a private phone call to Trump. Clinton conceded, only later revealing her pain in public with a personal plea to young people.
This loss hurts, but please never stop believing that fighting for what's right is worth it.
Trump aides praised it as a very classy speech. So what happened? One top Republican strategist calls it the revenge of the rural white voters with higher turnout than Mitt Romney 4 years ago. Trump won whites without college degrees by 39 points.
He was able to tap into this notion that the government and the political elites were indifferent and disdainful of their interests. And I think that they resented it.
Another factor, Hillary Clinton's failure to match the Obama coalition, African Americans and millennials. Despite a repudiation of his policies, President Obama promoted unity.
Everybody is sad when their side loses an election. But the day after, we have to remember that we're actually all on one team.
Tomorrow, Presidents 44 and 45 will meet at the White House to discuss a smooth transition. For Trump, the hard part is just beginning, pivoting from campaigning to governing. Today, visiting with staff and the next vice president, Mike Pence. Trump's only public comments today on Twitter, where he changed his bio to read President-elect. That's not all that's changing. Tonight, for the first time in the NYPD's 171-year history, the department is setting up security for a president-elect here in New York City. Some already referring to Trump Tower as White House North. Peter Alexander, NBC News, New York.
One of the most closely watched factors in this election was the role Latino voters would play. And while Trump did end up getting some 29% of the Latino vote, his rhetoric on immigration since day one is still cause for concern among many in that community. We get more on that from NBC's Miguel Almaguer.
At watch parties from Florida to California, this was the moment many Latino voters were afraid of. Shock and tears turned to fear.
They're still scared of what may happen to us.
We're stuck in limbo again. So it's really scary.
I think it's more surreal, more disbelief, more sadness that America didn't get it.
For many of the 11 million undocumented immigrants living in this country, the future became more uncertain.
It's going to be awakening a call for all the Hispanics, whether you're Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban.
I'm alone here.
For 16-year-old Valerie Travi, who was born in the U.S., this election seems more like an eviction. Her undocumented parents were deported back to Colombia 10 months ago. With Clinton, she saw hope. With Trump, helplessness.
Right now, I'm scared. I really don't know what to think because I don't know when I'm going to see my parents again.
clear in his campaign promise to crack down on illegal immigration.
We will stop illegal immigration, deport all criminal aliens, and dismantle every last criminal gang and cartel threatening our citizens.
Oh my God.
Yaneth Nunez works in Las Vegas, a hospitality worker whose sister is undocumented.
How worried are you that your sister will be separated from her children?
Oh God, I wish it cannot happen. It's my big fear.
Tonight, this is a country divided, and for some there is fear their families may soon be split apart too.
Here in what was the battleground state of Nevada, thousands of Latino union workers had canvassed this area for weeks, hoping to turn this purple state blue. They were successful in doing that. Now they say they will battle Donald Trump's policies so they don't become legislation. Lester?
Miguel Almaguer tonight in Las Vegas. Thank you. From now until the inauguration, Donald Trump has some big decisions to make, including a big one, filling a vacancy on the Supreme Court, which is likely to become one of the biggest battles in the early days of his administration. A Republican blockade prevented President Obama from filling the vacancy in his final years in office. And as our justice correspondent Pete Williams reports, this fight could be just the beginning.
It's a pressing issue for the new president, nominating a replacement for Antonin Scalia on the Supreme Court. With Republicans keeping control of the Senate, President Obama's nomination of Judge Merrick Garland, which languished for 8 months, is now dead. Trump earlier released 2 lists of potential nominees, mostly federal judges, many in the conservative mainstream. Replacing Justice Scalia with another conservative won't change the makeup of the court, but there could be other vacancies coming. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 83. She turns 84 in March, though she will likely remain in a Trump administration as long as her health permits. But Anthony Kennedy, a Reagan appointee who has voted with the liberals on gay rights and abortion, is 80, and Stephen Breyer, appointed by Bill Clinton, is 78. If either of them were to be replaced by Donald Trump, the court would be more conservative and might revisit recent rulings against restricting access to abortion and favoring gay rights.
With each of those, we have relatively recent decisions, and so the court would have to reverse its earlier rulings. But if they had the votes to do that, I'm not sure that they wouldn't.
Trump has said he thinks the core abortion rights ruling, Roe v. Wade, should be overturned, but he might need 2 more appointees beyond filling Scalia's vacancy to have a chance at that. Still, abortion rights advocates are worried about more restrictions.
While women might technically have the right under the Constitution to choose an abortion, they wouldn't really be able to exercise that right.
Trump was right when he said that overturning Roe wouldn't end abortion in America, though it would free up the states to make it illegal, and about half of them probably would. But it's been 43 years since that case was decided, and despite many attempts to overturn it, it's still on the books. Lester?
Pete Williams at the Supreme Court for us tonight. Pete, thanks. It was a big night for Republicans, not only in the presidential race, but also in the balance of power in Congress. The GOP holding control of both the House and the Senate. NBC's Casey Hunt has a look at the new faces about to make waves.
Before Tuesday, it was hard for Donald Trump to find a friend in Washington, even in his own party.
Why won't you talk about Mr. Trump?
Because I choose not to.
But now President Trump is moving in down the street from Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. On Wednesday, they started to come around.
I think what Donald Trump just pulled off is an enormous political feat. It's an enormous feat in that he heard those voices that were out there that other people weren't hearing, and he just earned a mandate.
The American people have spoken.
Republican leaders were also privately surprised their vulnerable Senate incumbents hung on across the map, winning at least a 51-seat majority.
God bless all of you, and God bless Florida. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And expected to win a 47-seat majority in the House as well. With control of both the White House and Congress, Republicans have a chance to shred President Obama's signature health care law.
This health care law is collapsing under its own weight. Now we have President Trump coming, who is asking us to do this. So with unified Republican government, we can fix this.
Still, Republicans need 60 votes in the Senate to pass controversial legislation.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Which means they'll have to work with Democrats. Another question? Whether some Republicans might refuse to vote with Trump on parts of his agenda. Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse once called Trump's campaign a dumpster fire. And then there's Senator Lindsey Graham.
He's becoming a jackass at a time when we need to have a serious debate about the future of the party and the country.
Graham telling NBC News late Tuesday night he was shocked by Trump's win, but now is willing to at least try to find some common ground. As that shock wears off, Democrats are grappling with whether or not they're going to be able to work with Donald Trump. Nancy Pelosi talking to Trump today about whether they could work together to build roads and bridges. And progressives like Elizabeth Warren and now tonight Bernie Sanders talking about potentially working with him to help working class families. Lester?
Casey Hunt tonight, thank you. While Donald Trump's many supporters are basking in his victory, many others woke up this morning feeling disillusioned by the headlines. Time and time again, critics accused Trump of running a campaign with undercurrents of racism, and those concerns persist now that the election results show a sharp racial divide. NBC's Ron Allen with more on that.
Outside the nation's African American History Museum, there's deep worry about President-elect Donald Trump's victory and the huge turnout by rural, working-class, white voters.
How much is it about race? I mean, Trump has made the whole election about race, so about 100% of it.
I'm not angry. I'm hurt. I'm hurt because it says a lot about America.
They see what's been called a white lash. White Americans feeling left out and deep resentment as the nation grows more diverse, rallied by a candidate who promised to ban Muslims, wall out Mexicans, and who challenged the very legitimacy of the nation's first black president. How much of this is about President Obama, a backlash against him?
Folk just didn't know what to do. When he won the first time, they were confused and upset. When he won the second time, that just really sent them over the rail.
Some on social media today using the hashtag #NotMyPresident.
I think for family you're concerned, because a lot of people here are trying to fit in.
Despite the taunting written on the wall, conservatives pushing back at the charge of racism.
People who define the character and who define the values of our country were the winners in what happened yesterday.
I think the new president has an important responsibility to lead and also to work to unify.
Still today, with President-elect Trump, some worry their country has turned against them.
As a black person, I feel like I'm taken as nothing.
Deep doubts about whether Mr. Trump, who said he intends to be a president for all Americans, can heal a very divided nation. Ron Allen, NBC News, Washington.
NBC's Tom Brokaw joins us now. Tom, you just saw that story there. We knew there was a divide in this country even before yesterday, but now we see exactly where it lies. Is it more worrisome than we knew?
I think at this point, people are still in kind of a daze. If people really want to know the truth, Lester, and they're trying to work their way through it, I think it would be important for the president-elect to find a way to say that he wants to represent all the people, and he needs to know what their interests are as well. I've seen a lot. President Kennedy was assassinated when I was a young reporter. Then 1968 came along. It was terrific trauma at that time, of that fall. And then Richard Nixon was forced to resign during Watergate. This country has been through a number of these traumatic events, and we only get pulled back together when the leadership says that we've got to get through this together. So I think one of the most important messages that the new president-elect can provide for the country going forward is to say, I'm here for all of you. And we need to, he did say early in the campaign, I can do more for African Americans than the Democratic Party has done. We need to find more ways to get you good jobs. So I think he has to continue that theme. But at this point, Lester, as you know, we're still kind of a never land, because yesterday at this hour, the Democrats thought they were going to get the White House and the Senate and maybe even the Congress. 24 hours later, they're a minority party, and they're reeling from what they've been through.
Let me ask you this. When we saw Donald Trump come out last night, he was very humble. He was very president-like. Does the job change the man typically? You've covered a lot of administrations.
Well, it's a combination of the two. That was a Donald Trump last night that we had not seen much during this campaign, even though people in his own party said he had to behave like that more. I do think when you are suddenly the president-elect, you're a figure in history, you're the leader of the most powerful nation in the world, the greatest experiment in democracy, you're going to be living in the White House and representing all of us, it has to have an effect on anyone at that point, or at least I hope that it does.
All right, Tom, good to have you. Great having you with our coverage last night as well.
Okay, Lester.
All right. Still ahead, Trump's victory. Many are calling it a stinging blow to President Obama's legacy. How much can President-elect Trump undo? Also, from high fives to protests, how America is reacting to this momentous election. We're back now with more of the ripple effect from the dramatic change about to occur in Washington. With the Republicans about to control the White House and both houses of Congress, President Obama could see many parts of his legacy undone. NBC's Kristen Welker now with more on that.
Grant Park, 2008. President Obama swept into office on a message of hope and change.
We have seen so much, but there's so much more to do.
Now, 8 years later, President-elect Donald Trump saying he's the change agent, vowing to unravel the Obama legacy piece.
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing Obamacare.
By piece.
My number one priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran.
All that firing up President Obama one last time. The president hit the campaign trail like he was on the ballot. 19 events for Hillary Clinton.
There has never been a man or a woman, not me, not Bill, nobody, more qualified than Hillary Clinton.
He's been the most active president looking for a successor to win than anybody since Teddy Roosevelt in 1908.
Much of it personal. After Trump pushed the birther conspiracy, the president roasting Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner 5 years ago.
No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing?
Trump watched stone-faced, fuming, many saying that moment may have helped push him into running. Tonight, White House sources say their entire team stunned and devastated, some sobbing, worried all they've worked for could be undone. Kristen Welker, NBC News, New York.
We're back in a moment with a wild ride on Wall Street after this election took so many by surprise. On Wall Street, the markets finished near a record high today after the Dow futures dropped 800 points overnight as this election drama played out, then surging back throughout the day. MSNBC anchor and business correspondent Ali Velshi is here with us. Ali, how do you explain this extreme volatility?
Well, Lester, while we were here last night and it started to look like a Trump victory, the only markets that were open for trading were overseas in Asia. So what investors do when something sudden and unexpected happens is they dump the stock. They sell it. They figure it out later. So they sold that stock. That's what caused the Japanese and the South Korean markets to go down about 5%. As time went by and the Trump victory became a certainty, analysts had a chance to look at the stocks that would gain, the industries that would gain from a Trump presidency, and the losses got smaller and smaller as they went across Europe to the point that by the time the markets opened in the United States, the losses had been erased and there was a small gain. And through the course of the day, investors just ferreted out those industries like telecom, like utilities, like coal, like infrastructure building companies that would do well under a Trump presidency, bought lots and lots of them, and you ended up with a 257-point gain.
All right, Ali Velshi, good to see you. Thank you. When we come back, America's future voters, the big lessons they learned in this race for president. Finally, tonight as a country, we've all come to the end of a very long journey. And while not everyone is happy with how this election has turned out, the fact remains America has spoken. Our Rahema Ellis is in the battleground of North Carolina to see how it's impacting Americans from cafes to classrooms.
On the streets of Raleigh today, there was excitement.
I'm just happy.
And apprehension.
I'm concerned with the Supreme Court.
There was also shock.
What were your thoughts when you woke up this morning and saw the news?
I burst into tears. I was horrified. I hadn't even started to entertain the possibility.
Kelly Rosensky is disappointed, but determined to look ahead.
I'm a little nervous, but we will survive as a nation. We always do. And we'll make the most of it. We'll come together.
But there were protests across the country today. High school students in Des Moines and Seattle walking out. Mothers took to social media, wondering how to guide their kids. I cannot for the life of me figure out how to explain this to them. But in Scranton, Pennsylvania, it was high fives.
Knowing that we have a new president, a new vice president, we have one of the best marriages that we could ever wish for in this country.
Tell me, what was your favorite part of the
Back in North Carolina at Cary Elementary, they had cast their own votes for president.
It is important that even though their candidate may not have won
last night, that they still honor the other children in our class and respect their decisions and their opinions.
What do you want from your new president?
I want him to be nice and kind.
What advice would you give our new president?
I'd say don't be selfish, because in certain problems you'll work with other leaders. You have to listen to other people's ideas.
The next generation, learning at an early age how democracy works. Rahima Ellis, NBC News, Raleigh, North Carolina.
And that will do it for us on this Wednesday night. I'm Lester Holt. For all of us at NBC News, thank you for watching and good night.